Before cameras, before photographs, before we ever learned to trap light inside glass and metal, there was memory. The kind that wasn't stored in pixels or paper, but in the bones of the earth, the rhythm of a voice, and the carvings of a hand that refused to let a moment disappear. Memory is older than language, older than civilization itself. It began as a feeling, a need to hold onto what time was trying to erase. And so, long before the first photograph was taken, human beings found ways to preserve what mattered most, who they were, what they saw, and what they feared would be forgotten. Imagine standing deep inside a cave 40,000 years ago, a torch flickering against wet stone. The air smells of smoke and clay. A figure kneels beside you, grinding red ochre into dust, mixing it with animal fat. With steady hands, they paint horses, lions, bison, running across the curved stone as if the walls themselves were alive. These are not decorations. They are records, memories of a hunt, of survival, of awe. Each figure on that wall was someone's attempt to make sure that their story would not vanish with their heartbeat. In the caves of Chauvet in France, and later in Lascaux, we see the first human photographs, images drawn not by light but by longing. To remember was to defy death. Across the world in the deserts of Australia, memory took on another form. The Aboriginal people created what we now call songlines, melodies that mapped the land itself. Each note, each rhythm was a road, a river, a mountain. To sing a songline was to navigate, to preserve, to exist in harmony with memory. When the land changed, the song changed. And as long as the song was sung, the land and the people remained one. These were not simply traditions, they were living archives. In every verse, ancient memories pulsed, passed from one generation to another, never written down, yet never forgotten. They prove that memory is not always visual. Sometimes it is something you can only hear, something that vibrates inside you. Far north in the frozen world of the Inuit, stories were carved into ivory and bone. A hunter might carve the shape of a seal, a spirit, or a myth into a tool. These carvings were not just art, they were code. To look at them was to remember a lesson, a journey, a warning. The same could be said for the petroglyphs scattered across Asia, Africa, and the Americas, rock carvings that spoke of migrations, battles, and dreams. These ancient inscriptions were humanity's attempt to make memory permanent in a world built on decay. Then somewhere between survival and civilization, we discovered the power of the written word. In the valleys of Mesopotamia, clay tablets were pressed with wedge-shaped marks, cuneiform, the earliest known script. What began as a tool for trade became a tool for remembrance. Lists of grain became stories of kings, gods, and floods. Egypt, too, turned memory into something sacred. Hieroglyphs adorned tombs and temples, not merely to decorate, but to preserve the essence of life. Pharaohs believed that to write a name was to keep a soul alive. Every symbol on those walls was a piece of immortality, carved in stone so that the dead could continue to speak. In ancient China, scribes wrote on bamboo slips and silk, recording philosophy, poetry, and governance long before paper existed. Words were not only carriers of knowledge, they were proof of continuity. And in Mesoamerica, the Maya developed their own intricate hieroglyphic system, blending text and imagery into books made of bark. These weren't random inventions scattered across continents. They were echoes of the same human instinct, to resist the silence that time imposes on all things. But as writing evolved, memory began to shift from heart to hand. We no longer had to carry everything within us. We could entrust it to symbols, to surfaces, to objects. And in doing so, something profound happened. We began to forget. For the first time, the burden of remembering was shared with the world itself. Our minds became lighter, but our dependence grew. The clay, the scroll, the parchment, they became our external memories, extensions of our consciousness. During the Middle Ages, memory became an art form again. Inside monasteries, monks worked by candlelight, creating illuminated manuscripts. Gold leaf shimmered in the margins, saints and angels danced across pages. These books were more than texts. They were vessels of devotion, repositories of truth in an age when few could read. Each line written was a prayer, each illustration a testimony to beauty and faith. To open such a book was to step into the collective memory of a people who feared that knowledge, like life, could vanish without warning. Yet outside those sacred walls, memory was alive in another way. It lived in the voices of storytellers. Around fires, in marketplaces, in village squares, people gathered to listen. Legends were told, songs repeated, histories purred. These oral traditions were not just entertainment, they were survival. Through story, people remembered who they were. A good storyteller was not merely a performer, but a guardian of memory. And as long as the story was told, the memory endured, shape-shifting with every retelling but never dying. Then came a new age, the Renaissance. The boundaries between memory and image began to blur once again. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Vermeer, and Caravaggio studied light, perspective, and anatomy with almost scientific devotion. They sought not only to paint what they saw, but to capture how it felt to see. Their canvases became mirrors of reality, moments frozen in oil and pigment. For the first time, art began to imitate the precision of the eye. Every brushstroke was an act of remembrance. These paintings were more than beauty, they were the closest humanity had come to freezing time. And then in the early 19th century, light itself learned to remember. A man named Joseph Nicephore-Niepce took a small metal plate, coated it with chemicals, and placed it inside a box fitted with a lens. He pointed it out of his window and left it for hours. When he finally looked at the plate, he saw it, the faint outline of rooftops and sunlight, the first photograph in human history. For the first time, memory was captured by light itself. What once took generations of skill, of storytelling, of artistry, could now be done by a machine. The camera became our new storyteller, and photography our new language of remembrance. But something subtle changed. When memory became mechanical, our relationship with it fractured. We no longer had to interpret or imagine, we only had to capture. The photograph made remembering effortless, but it also made forgetting easier. When every moment can be preserved, moments lose their weight. Ancient people remembered because they had to. We take pictures because we can. And yet in every cave painting, every carved bone, every song passed from parent to child, there is a message to us. A reminder that memory is not just about holding onto images, but about holding onto meaning. Today, we live in an ocean of memories, billions of photographs uploaded every day, endless streams of faces, sunsets, meals, and fleeting smiles. The act of remembering has become almost casual, automated. But perhaps that's why looking back at how it all began feels so powerful. Because our ancestors didn't just record life, they translated it. Every mark they made carried intention. Every story they told carried soul. Their memories weren't about proof, they were about presence. When you stand before an ancient cave painting, or read the faded lines of a clay tablet, you feel something beyond history, you feel connection. You realize that across thousands of years, through every form of expression, humanity has been trying to answer the same question. How do we make time stop, even for a moment? And maybe that's what all memory is, a rebellion against the inevitable. To paint a bison, to sing a mountain, to carve a story, to write a name, to take a photograph, it's all the same instinct, repeated endlessly in different forms. It's our way of saying we were here, we matter. Because in the end, memory is not just about what we keep, it's about what refuses to be lost. And long before cameras, humanity had already mastered the art of remembering. The methods changed, the materials evolved, but the desire to preserve the fragile light of our existence remains the same. That is how memories were preserved before cameras. Through fire and pigment, song and stone, ink and faith. Through hands that shaped the earth and hearts that dared to outlive time. And even now in our digital age, the echoes of those ancient memories linger, reminding us that long before we captured light, we learned how to capture meaning.